record this session, and that will mean we can play it back through from a link from our website. So I hope nobody has any problems with that, and we can share it more widely. Also, we are running a bilingual channel on this one, and you should see at the bottom of your Zoom ribbon that you have an interpretation icon. If you click on that and select the language, you can then ask questions in Welsh or English or in the Welsh language, and they'll be translated through. We have Nerys who's doing our interpretation today. So I'm pleased to be able to welcome you all to this show and tell, where we're going to get a progress on the landscape review, the excellent progress that's being made. So I'm now going to hand over, I think it's to Antonio, who is from the PSC, who's our delivery partners in this work, and he's going to start and kick off today's proceedings. Thank you very much. Antonio, over to you.
Thanks so much, Simon, and thanks for joining and or watching afterwards. And as always, our contact details will be available for any follow-up questions. So I'll just run us through a little bit about the agenda and then hand over to the team as well to take us through that. So we'll cover just brief recap who we are, and then we wanted to give on the meat of the session for 2 bit updates on the service landscape database that we're developing, and share some of those findings, which I think is really it's really important that people get a sense of kind of what we're gathering, and also any feedback very welcome on how to make that even better. Thirdly, insights that we've gleaned from lots and lots of user research / interviews / conversations with service users and owners, which have been hugely helpful and really helping to guide our thinking. And then fourthly, the next steps for the landscape review. So if we just nudge on, please, Anita, we will come just as a brief recap to the team. So this is a wider team. Anne is our CDPS lead and currently unavailable today, but we've obviously been through all of this together before. Henry, it's August, isn't it? So many people on leave. So Henry, Phil, and Rob on leave, but you can see in the green, myself, Neve, Anita, and Nerys are on hand with you right now. So if we just nudge ahead, just as the reminder of the project goal, for those of you who might just be joining us for the first time. So the intention of this review is to understand the state of Welsh public services, and from that baseline understanding, we will then be able, we believe, to identify opportunities and importantly prioritize which ones to pursue, identify potential areas for join up of teams of services, and really importantly, get to a tangible sense of what's the investment and the timescales and the benefits that can be delivered from these opportunities, so that we can make real improvements going forward. So that's what we're here to do. And in terms of the actual rhythms that we've been working to, on the next slide, you'll just see the sprints that we've been running on this discovery. We're running in sort of classic good agile fashion. So this is the discovery phase. There will be an alpha and we believe hopefully a beta as well afterwards. We're in the discovery phase. We're in sort of just about to approach week 8 of the discovery, so 2 more weeks to go. And as you'll see on this, a lot of this has been about user research, understanding service owner needs, understanding decision maker needs. So who ultimately is the landscape review here to serve, and what do they need from it? And we're now hoping to start tentatively share some of the analysis and the findings that we've been developing. So I'll be quiet now and hand over to the team to go into some of the details. Oh no, sorry, this is still me, isn't it? And so we love doing a little bit of "you said we did" to show that we're listening. And so just some feedback that we've had from previous from previous show and tells, and also from the work that we're doing, 3 particular areas. So one was that the importance of not missing sort of internal users or staff-facing services from the review. So we have included them. However, there was a strong steer that we should make sure to prioritize citizen-facing services in the discovery. So we've weighted our service owner sample to do that. Secondly, avoid using technical language, which is very, very important, and please still do kick nudges if that's the case, to try and be as sort of plain and clear as possible, and we've updated our materials accordingly. And thirdly, and I think this will be an ongoing point, that the landscape review is here to make things better for service owners and for everyone, and we need to be super, super precise and clear about what we're asking of service owners. People are busy, and this is could be seen to be additional work, but we want to be really clear how this benefits people. So we've developed a slide deck, and we'll be doing some work on developing a clear sort of top level, very brief few words / narrative to help explain, what the ask is and how this is beneficial. So I think now I will be quiet.
Thanks, Antonio. So first of all, I'll go ahead and give an update on the service database. So the database today contains approximately 280 entries, and it only represents the services that we've heard about and identified so far. But we are aware that there are many, many more services out there. And this is why the proportions of services, for example, by owner organization or delivery sector, are not at all representative at this stage of the actual landscape. In terms of what we expect to exist in the Welsh public sector in total, our expectation is that there are approximately 500 central government services, 800 to 1,000 local government services, though we've heard different kind of estimates of what this number could be, and over 1,000 health services. And importantly, in this area, it will be important to narrow down what is meant exactly by a service in the health sector. In terms of next steps, we want to grow the database via desk research and by compiling previous research and lists that have already been created by different digital leads throughout Wales. And we also plan to supplement the database with information from the deep dives that we have been carrying out in the past 2 weeks. And plan to continue with going forward. It's also important to note that the database will be reshaped accordingly with the kinds of information that we are able to capture, so that it can also present information in a useful way. So to give a better idea of where the database is at the moment, I'm going to go ahead and share that. So at the moment, we can see the different services recorded here and divided by CDO remit. So for example, this contains the services that are under Welsh Government arm's length bodies. And if, for example, we take the Welsh Revenue Authority landfill tax payments, we can see that by conducting desk-based research on services, it's possible to get information about things like user needs, the user journey, and the service description. We've also been keeping track of where the services can be accessed online. The different CDO remits, the owner organizations, and so on. But it's also important to note that it's not possible to find some information fields only through desk research. For example, when it comes to information about whether the delivery is provided by the public sector or externally contracted, and finding details about specific service owners and which teams and people are involved in delivering them is also very difficult to access without actually speaking to people, which is why if, for example, we look at a service that we conducted a deep dive on, which was the All Wales Education Identity Provider that's provided by Hub, looking into a service by talking to the service owners and the organization, it's possible to get a much richer idea of what the service is about and how it's run. It's also important to note that all the information from the deep dive interviews is currently not being captured by the database, and we are thinking about ways to integrate information from different sources in a helpful way. An interesting aspect has also been whether services are external facing, so directed at citizens, or internal facing for public servants. We've also set up a dashboard that keeps track of the cases in the database. And from this, we can see that currently we've been focusing on services offered by arm's length bodies and central gov, and less so on services offered by health and local government. Though, as I said, we are aware that the majority of services available to the public are actually under the categories of health and local government. So we're trying to think about how to streamline data collection in these areas as much as possible to be able to gather all the information that is available. It's also interesting to note that we've been focusing mainly on external or citizen-facing services. As Antonio said, this has been the focus of the discovery, though especially in the context of health, we are aware that there are many and very important services that are directed at frontline public services. And this is something that we've begun to investigate with, for example, talking to the service owner for the digital nursing records. So going back then to the learnings from the database so far, we have learned that many information services across different organizations are currently delivered as downloadable documents. So there's definitely an opportunity to digitize these to make them more effective for users. In terms of other opportunities that we've identified, we've also noticed that at times services will be mentioned on websites, for example, but rather than allowing users to access the services directly, contact details for relevant people in local government, for example, will be mentioned instead. So there are extra steps that users have to take to be able to access services. And this could be, for example, calling or submitting forms in paper via email or by post. So we've definitely identified opportunities for digitization across the board. In terms of continuing to compile the database and gathering as much useful information from it, we've noticed that by looking into individual services, it's quite challenging to access higher level information, for example, about costs that would be useful in decision making and prioritizing investment. So desk research can only provide limited information, and further details can only be accessed by actively engaging with service owners. So this is going to be a priority going forward. And our ability to make recommendations and prioritize will only be as good as the data we have. So we plan to continue engaging directly with digital leads and service owners as much as possible going forward. So I will hand over to Niamh now, who's going to talk about insights from service users.
Lovely, thanks Anita. Can you jump to the next slide, please? Fantastic. So as Anita said, we've been looking to populate our service database via going out and speaking to service owners in the form of a number of deep dives. And as our data collection tool, we have designed a service data survey, which we have been running through in our interviews with our service owners. As a bit of context on the methodology for how we developed this survey, we initially went out and spoke to kind of CDOs and digital decision makers to learn about what they wanted to know about services. We then transformed those needs into a series of questions, which we piloted with an initial few friendly service owners and really kind of refined the questions to develop our formal survey. As I mentioned, we're testing this survey with our deep dive participants and continuously collecting feedback on how the questions are asked, what examples are provided, and where there might not be areas of kind of clarity. And yes, so this data is forming kind of the first step in creating a structured database, which we will continue to grow out alpha through submitting the survey to a much broader range of people and getting a much wider spread of engagement. Lovely, thank you. So for our deep dives so far, we are planning to conduct about 15 in the discovery. We have met with 6 or 7 of those, but have also, probably worth flagging, have met with a lot of local authorities as well, who are kind of the first step before we connect with the individual service owners. We have aimed to get a really kind of wide variety of different service owners across central government, local government, and health, and to kind of really understand the variety within the service landscape. So Anita, if you can jump onto the next slide, please. We have started to map these services against kind of a range of axes to ensure that we are covering a really wide spread of organisations. So at the moment, we've had kind of an equal spread of high volume and low volume services. Thus far, most of the services we've spoken to have been highly digitised. So following this presentation, if you have any recommendations for services that are currently paper-based but have aspirations to digitise, we'd love to hear from them, love to speak to them. Similarly, we found it a little bit harder to connect with externally contracted services, mostly because when we've engaged with local authorities or with central government organisations, the services that people are really proud of and really want to talk about are the ones they have developed with their internal teams. And then we've had kind of a spread of short and long contracts and high and low costs. So our plan would be to, once we've completed the 15 deep dives, is to be able to map all of these across our exemplar characteristics and ensure that all kind of bases are covered. Lovely. Handing back to Anita.
Thanks, Niamh. So we've received feedback from service owners across all elements of the landscape review. So first of all, in terms of engagement with the review, one thing that has come up in more than one interview has been that digital leads across Wales have heard about the landscape review, for instance, through social media, but weren't sure about how they were going to be involved. And importantly, one quote that really captures this is someone who told us that they weren't sure if it was going to happen to them or with them or for them. So from this, we can learn that it's really important that we have a clear communication strategy going forward to ensure that everyone in the public sector who is involved in digital services knows how they can be involved and how to contribute to the work of the landscape review. In terms of survey design, we've learned that different people within teams will often have different sets of information about the same service. So for instance, one person may have financial information and someone else on the same team might have the technical information about the service. So the takeaway there was to ensure that the survey was built in a way that allowed for it to be shared between different people and for them to complete the survey separately, but about the same service. Similarly, we found that service owners will not always have the same definitions in mind when it comes to key terms such as user journey. So our task then is to provide examples and make the survey as clear as possible to ensure that we are collecting data that is comparable between different services. We also learned about the different opportunities that service owners associate with their services and with the potential offered by the landscape review. And we were able to compare these with the OECD standards for digital government. So importantly, most interviewees talked about how important it is to digitize services for improving user experience and meeting currently unmet needs. So this includes digitizing services that are currently paper-based. And we've heard from different areas how useful and important it would be to make that transition. 1/3 of the interviewees talked about a need for shared platforms and components, which is one of the aims of the landscape review as well. And they mentioned wanting to work together rather than against each other. 1/5 approximately of interviewees mentioned the importance of upskilling digital teams. And there was a mention of sometimes resource not being available when it comes to specific areas such as business analysis or translation or security, which is actually a specific issue that came up in different interviews. So an interest in improving that aspect in digital services. Some standards were mentioned more rarely. and they are those that pertain to identifying best practice and developing common standards for services. So the takeaway here is that it could be important for us to help service owners understand the possible opportunities and benefits of shared solutions. And in terms of the OECD opportunities that were not mentioned at all so far, they were offering data insights to those building and making decisions about services, and creating opportunities for accessing and owning one's own data to know how it's being used. So we thought this was really interesting because it kind of shows that these two opportunities might be beyond the current visions of service owners, and there's perhaps a greater focus on day-to-day running and challenges involved in initial development rather than future aims. So it would be really interesting for us to unlock these opportunities by ensuring that the underlying requirements are met. For instance, that services run smoothly for an extended period of time, and that teams have sufficient resource to consider these possible developments for their services. So I'll hand back over to Niamh for next steps for the landscape review.
Brilliant, thanks Anita. So we've got 5 next steps for the rest of the discovery. Some of it is continuing to do things that we are already doing. For example, unlocking existing lists of services and engaging with key knowledge holders who have oversight of a large number of services, so we can continue to populate our database. Second is continuing with the deep dives that we're doing, listening to service owners' needs and identifying kind of common themes here. To continue to test and iterate our survey, with the main goal being that when this goes out to alpha, it will just be a survey that's submitted. We won't be in meetings with service owners giving commentary, so it needs to be in a position where everyone can understand it and not need too much input or kind of narrative around each of the questions. And then finally, we're going to continue to collect data on the services we're including in the deep dives and start to think about this in the next step, analyze it, and combine it with the insight from the database and our procurement data analysis to ensure that actually we have kind of initial hypothesis of what the priority opportunities arising from the landscape review might be already from the discovery. So when we start taking steps forward to alpha, we have kind of an idea of where we might be heading. I've mentioned procurement data. We have started to analyze this, and this would kind of come in to validate the work we're doing both in the database and in the deep dive interviews. At the moment, we found some quite interesting things with it, so we're going to continue to kind of test and validate our analysis before we present this to you. And then the final step here is starting to think about the transition from discovery to alpha and the roadmap for finalizing the outputs of the discovery. We currently have 4 more sprints left, and we really want to make sure that by the point that we start moving towards alpha, we have kind of our best ideas to go forward with. We have a strong sense of the landscape, and we have a strong sense of exactly where we're going to be going over the following 10 weeks. Lovely. So I think now I can open the floor to questions.
Hi Niamh and everyone. I think it might just be me. It feels like it's just I feel a bit lonely here.
It is.
We should have just said to you at the beginning, it's just me. We could just have a chat. Don't worry about it. I don't really have it. I haven't got any questions. I think it's just I think it's just an acknowledgement that most of what you've found so far in your dives is pretty much what we've been finding out in across local authorities. It's the same. So I think that's in one way that's quite refreshing, that there isn't anything terrifyingly new coming out. There's no big scary other concern or worry around the corner that it is around and understanding, trying to all speak the same language, understanding that common platforms would, they're a target and an aim, but actually that requires some level of standardization and understanding and agreement. those bits, they're the hard bits. You know, the platform's the easy bit. It's all of the other bits that tend to be the more challenging bit, and that resources can be a struggle. And you know, we hear this constantly in every conversation we have with local authorities. So I think it's just for me, it is just a kind of validation of, you know, this is exactly what we were expecting. Hopefully you're getting access to enough of the right people. It is probably a bit of a crummy time of year to get access to everybody, because we know there's lots of, as today shows, there are lots of people not available. But, you know, hopefully you're getting what you need when you need it. And if there's anything else we can do, then obviously we'll try and prod people in the right direction.
Lovely. Thanks so much, Sam.
No worries. But it was very nice. I just thought, it's just me. I feel a bit, I should have just said to you, don't worry, we'll have a chat offline or something. But I didn't realise until we were halfway through. I blame Simon. It's because I knew Simon was here.
We are recording, and what we'll do is we're going to put our links up onto the show and tells onto our website now, and recognise, because we keep that rhythm going of these. It's very useful for many people to be able to drop in at other times on these, and our whole spirit of working in the open. Yeah,
I'm sure, as you probably found, Friday's not generally a good day. Local authorities have all of their big meetings generally on a Friday, so you'll find all the councillors are out, and the chief execs tend to have their meetings too. They keep that as a bit of a day, but then it's also a non-working day for lots of people. So it just is Fridays. People are going to probably have to catch it on catch up, I think, in the modern world. But thank you anyway. Thank you for bothering just for me.
Pleasure.
Much appreciated.
So no other questions. I think that's it. I think we can say thank you very much. And I'm trying to think of what is the rhythm. Is it fortnightly? We've agreed to try and do these. So we've got 2 weeks now for the next one. Okay. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye.